If I asked you to think of a lizard, you'd probably picture something like this guy, a lava lizard from the Galápagos Islands. They're small, fast, and feed mostly on insects. You know, normal lizard stuff. But there's another lizard here in the Galápagos, a bizarre giant with an unbelievable story, the marine iguana, and it's easily the weirdest lizard in the entire world.
They are literally everywhere. This is absolutely insane. Look at this. It's pretty clear that the challenge with marine iguanas is not finding them. They're absolutely everywhere, and this is a dream come true. We've waited basically our whole lives just to be here and see these guys in the wild. This is one of the most incredible animals that we can find here in the Galapagos, and Evan is right. The challenge isn't finding them. The challenge is filming some of their really iconic behavior. We would love to see the marine iguana earning its namesake, diving beneath the waves in search of food. And that is exactly what we are going to do right now. But take a look at that animal. I cannot get over this.
To truly understand what makes marine iguanas so weird and special, we need to understand why their unique lifestyle arose in the first place. When the ancestors of modern marine iguanas first reached the newly formed Galápagos Islands around 4.5 million years ago, they were met with a harsh and desolate world. Like their modern relatives, these iguanas only ate plants, but since the archipelago was almost entirely barren of vegetation at that time, the interiors of the islands held little prospects for them. The only place where plants grew in abundance was underwater, as the coastlines and shallow seas that surround the islands are full of algae. And since they didn't have any other options, that's exactly what they evolved to feed on. Over millions of years, their adaptations were honed for an aquatic lifestyle that's unlike anything else on the planet today, and it's something we knew we had to share with you when we visited the Galápagos. My name is Evan, and this is Harrison. We're twin brothers on a mission to make you an insider in the natural world, and it's bizarre life stories like the marine iguanas that inspired us to learn more about nature and how it works, because we're fascinated by the fact that a survival strategy this weird can even exist. Funnily enough, when scientists first saw marine iguanas, they thought they were really ugly and sort of scary looking. But when you look a little closer, you'll see that all of their features are purpose-built for their unusual way of life.
That is a beautiful specimen if I've ever seen one. If you look at the anatomy of the marine iguana, it's really clear to see how perfectly adapted they are for a marine lifestyle. Take a look at that thick tail they have. It's really strong and it helps them propel themselves through the water like a rudder that makes them swim super effectively. They have nice sharp claws that they use to grip onto the rocks that can withstand even the strongest of currents, and from what I'm told, the currents out here in the Galapagos are really tough. They also have very blunt heads. It's different from the shape of a lot of lizards, and that enables them to get their face nice and close to the rocks and scrape the algae that they eat right off the surface. So they are absolutely made for this ocean-going lifestyle, and I can't wait to see it live in the water. I'll tell you what, I have a newfound respect for why those claws are so useful navigating this habitat. The thing about marine iguanas is that not all of them are actually able to dive beneath the waves. They need to attain a certain body size to be able to get enough thermal energy to survive being underwater for extended periods of time. Like all lizards, these guys are ectothermic, they're cold-blooded, so they rely on external conditions to regulate their body temperature. And if they don't have enough energy from the sun, they won't be able to survive diving to find their food. But the biggest males, the biggest females, are able to dive beneath the surface and get a feed in. This is a beautiful individual here, and we are on the island of San Cristobal. So that makes this guy a member of the subspecies Amblyrhynchus cristatus mertensii. There are actually two subspecies here on San Cristobal, and both of them are endangered. So that's why it's particularly important that we're trying to see feeding behavior here on this island.
Because only the biggest iguanas are able to swim, seeing this behavior means that the local population is producing strong adults that are healthy enough to survive this extreme feeding method. If we don't see any iguanas in the water, it could mean that these endangered lizards aren't getting the resources they need to grow to the right size, or it could be a sign that they are facing too many disturbances to bask effectively and build up their required energy reserves, both of which could be disastrous for the population overall.
As I'm trying to go in the water, these two are actually just getting a feed in. Look at this guy. Now this is what the smaller marine iguanas will do in order to get a meal. They can't dive down at that size, but they can forage on all of the algae that encrusts the rocks below the tide line. So as the water recedes, the smaller iguanas are able to feed right here on the rocks, but the bigger iguanas are the ones that dive down, and that is what we're gonna try and find.
As we got in the water, the first thing that crossed my mind is, man, this does not look like a place that a lizard would want to be. The water wasn't even as frigid as it usually is, but it was still pretty cold in there, and the currents we were told about are no joke. Swimming under these swells is hard work, not to mention filming, and we were being tossed around like rag dolls while trying to keep our shots steady. The rocks were covered in the rich algae salad that the iguanas depend on, and after a little while of scouring the murky water, we spotted a dark shape cruising along the bottom. This was it, the behavior we had traveled across the world to see. A marine iguana happily grazing away on algae like it was nothing, seemingly unfazed by the brutal pull of the waves and the current. It may not look like much, but if you really want to put into context how impressive this is, here's what trying to swim in this spot looked like from our perspective. Now that we're down here with the iguanas, all of their crazy-looking adaptations make perfect sense. And those features are just scratching the surface of how well equipped these lizards are for their aquatic dining. Marine iguanas can dive up to 30 meters down, though most of their feeding happens close to shore in areas that are usually less than 5 meters deep. When swimming deeper, they can hold their breath for over 30 minutes at a time. But in the shallows, the iguanas will surface every few minutes before moving on to another grazing spot. They really didn't seem to be bothered by much, and they completely ignored us as they focused entirely on feeding, which makes sense because marine iguanas are usually only able to feed one time per day in a very specific window when the tides and the sun are right. If they try to eat when the surf is too rough or when there isn't enough sun left in the sky for them to bask afterwards, they could die. Especially considering the fact that their body temperature can drop almost 20 degrees after swimming. Remember, being cold-blooded means that all of your energy comes from the outside. So if you don't get enough sun, you can't really move, digest food, or even breathe well. This is also why iguanas typically return to the same feeding spots every day. They pick locations where they know that as soon as they get out of the water, they'll be able to recuperate and build up their energy again without being disturbed, as they're very vulnerable after feeding. We ended up seeing more than 10 different iguanas in the water with us, and finally getting to observe this bizarre and unique behavior in the wild is something neither of us will ever forget.
I definitely did. But wow, that is exactly what we were hoping to see. There are marine iguanas here on San Cristobal that can still dive. This population produces individuals that are large enough to engage in this behavior. And that's a really good sign for this population in particular because of how endangered they are. It's really good to see that there are still strong, healthy adults that can keep this population going into the future. Absolutely. But there is a lot more that we need to understand about marine iguanas to really know their full story that's playing out here in the Galapagos. We have a lot more work to do, for sure.
Like so many of the species here in the Galapagos, marine iguanas are facing a number of challenges that are only getting more severe. Climate change and the vicious El Niño cycle threaten the entire iguana population with extinction if things aren't brought under control. And we are going to be exploring this alarming problem in many of our upcoming videos from this archipelago, including a deep dive into how different iguana species in the islands are responding to the changes happening around them. If you want to meet another animal with a fascinating and unexpected aquatic survival strategy, check out this video where we find one of Florida's most unique mammals that you've probably never heard of before. the marsh rabbit. And with that, we hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you in the next one.